This is Eric Rutan of Cannibal Corpse. You are listening to the Scars and Guitars podcast with Andrew McKay Smith.
G'day everybody, thanks so much for joining me. I've got a killer conversation to share with you featuring Scott Lewis from the group Carnifex. Now the catalyst for the chat with Scotty is due to the launch of a new album from Carnifex. It is titled Necromanteum, and according to the presser, it'll see light of day via Nuclear Blast Records on October 6th. So yes, in this conversation we talk about the album and the background under which it was created. But this conversation is far more notable as Scotty and I cover topics to do with the youth and their preference for woke and socialist ideology. So before we dive into the chat, for you people listening via the podcast apps, I have selected a tune for you. This is the title track from the new album Necromanteum. Once it's done, we'll dive into the conversation. For you good people on YouTube, you know the drill. I can't play music on the platform, so you'll hear the conversation straight away. Either way, let's go.
Spirits working over you.
Scott, I'm sorry, brother. Zoom decided it wanted to do some heck of an update right on the time that I decided to bloody log in for our chat, so apologies for that.
No worries. I was just scrolling Instagram.
What's there to see at the moment?
Oh, yeah. I'm always looking at cat memes and dog memes. It's always just like, it's like that sad cat, where they play the song and the cat looks all sad, or cat working out. Just, mind-numbing stuff.
What do you do when effectively you're a professional tourist these days? Well, thankfully you survived COVID. I want to talk to you a bit about that in a sec, actually, because we had a really good talk about the band surviving through that bloody awful period there. But how do you entertain yourself when you're touring so much?
How do I stay busy when I'm on tour? Actually, I feel like there's a fair amount to do when you're on tour. We're only playing for an hour, but usually we're headlining or co-headlining, so there's always a sound check in there somewhere. These days, there's usually a meet and greet in there somewhere. We don't really carry a lot of crew with us. Like, we have a light designer and a front of house engineer and a tour manager, but the gear has still got to get in and out of the trailer. So, we're unloading or we're packing. And then because you're out on the road, you got to find all your meals in the city you're in, So we're hunting for lunch, hunting for dinner. And then you got to sleep in there somewhere. Got to relax in there somewhere. So it's kind of structured, honestly. It kind of keeps us busy.
When we've had a number of conversations over the years, and when we last chatted, it was at the height of COVID, and you were very frank with me, which I appreciated, in that you more or less said that the future of the band was not so assured. It's great to see that. I guess it is now in some respects, but do you still feel as though things are a bit on tenterhooks, or do you feel as though the band is a valid ongoing concern for you?
At the time, it was definitely, the outlook was much more bleak because I don't think there was any way of really knowing what would come next, just because, before the pandemic, you would have never imagined, right?
Yeah, of course.
And so I think when we went through it, the lesson that the takeaway I kind of had was like, you just never know what's going to happen. And, we had just started to crawl out of it, but when we spoke, I don't even know if we had gone back on tour yet.
No, you hadn't. It was 21st of August or thereabouts, 2021. So within a day or two prior to that. But it was a bloody awful time. It wasn't just you guys. I'd had a number of people have off the record conversations with me, but you were prepared to go on the record there. And I think it laid bare the challenges that touring musicians and very valid and bands that have let's face it, a significant fan base for what we do, for the challenges that lay ahead.
Yeah, it was weird because, you never would have thought something like that would happen. A global phenomena that doesn't allow you to perform any shows. Like, I don't think that had ever happened other than, I couldn't even tell you, to be honest. I don't think it had ever happened. And then to go through that and, we make 80% of our money from touring, obviously we have the web stores, and you make a few bucks off of the streaming royalties and the physical royalties. But, really it's selling tickets, selling t-shirts on the road. That's where our income comes from. So I didn't know what the audience reaction was going to be like. Were people going to be hesitant? Were people going to be over it? I just had no idea. Thankfully, it actually worked out very well. And the fan base was extremely excited to go to shows again. And actually this last 2 years, almost 2 years, was some of the best touring we ever did. Not just from an enjoyment or attendance standpoint, but for the business as well. So it was the yo-yo effect, right? It went from it couldn't have been worse to couldn't have been better. I guess that's the dichotomy of life,
Did you write Necromanteum through that period?
No, Graveside was through the period of being on the road, or
the COVID period, the layover. I just call it the layover, but yeah.
Yeah, no, that was all Graveside. All that whole album was written during the lockdown, and then we started writing Necromantium. I guess it would have been the end of 21. We not too long after Graveside had come out, just because we try to take our time writing. Pardon me, I feel like I'm going to sneeze. We try to take our time writing, and we don't want to rush ourselves at the end, so we give ourselves a good head start. So we had started writing that record after we had already gone Necromantium, after we'd already gone back on the road.
Rightio. Okay. I mean, the obvious question then is, for you, for the lyrical themes, were they in any way influenced by what we spoke about just up top there?
No, I really got them all out on Graveside, and Graveside, if you go through those lyrics, they're actually quite dark. And that record was a very, inward facing album. It really examined a lot of what I think other musicians and just other people who were used to going to shows and just connecting with their friends and with music that they loved. It was a challenging time, so it was a very inward looking record, a lot of time for reflection. And then when we got to writing Necromantium, I had already done that, and I didn't really want to go mine all my personal experiences again for an album. And so I did a record that was more outward facing and had some more universal themes, like the supernatural and questions about, what comes next, if anything, and exploring the different thoughts on what comes next, whether it be reincarnation, ghosts, spirits, or nothing, just the void. So yeah, lyrically, it is a different album with very different topics.
Have you, off topic potentially, but it's certainly related, have you ever done any journeying, ayahuasca, that sort of thing?
No, I haven't.
If you're into topics that you've just mentioned there, I'd highly recommend it, because it lays bare some of these things about timelines and the like, and it helps you make sense of some of these things. It can be an extremely confronting process. You go through hell before you get to receive heaven, and all of your phobias and that which plays in your mind late at night, it's laid bare. But I just feel like after I've gone through that process, I have a bit more of an awareness and understanding of the supernatural too, because I think if you're into this sort of music at a participation level like what you are, and I guess I am to an extent, we have a natural inclination toward these things. For example, I do tarot card readings and the like, and I just found that my awareness and my perception of these things was changed somewhat for the positive after that experience.
Interesting. I have heard that from other people, that they talk about it's really kind of a harrowing journey. Yeah, I guess I try to explore those thoughts first through the lyrics, but then when you go on stage and you perform them, it really is a cathartic experience and a bit of a purge. And I think you can kind of end up traveling while you're in place. At least that's been my experience with the songs once you take them on stage and they start connecting with the audience.
Do you find, are you an avid reader and listener of things to do with the supernatural, and that is beyond?
I have been more so lately. Yeah, I guess I always have been, but more so recently. Yeah.
I'm just curious as to what you'd recommend for people, because a ton of people are going to listen, obviously, and they're going to listen to this chat, go and check out the album, and then be inspired to check out some of the podcasts and books that you might have consumed lately. I'm personally just finding that there is just a real lack of decent podcasts out there on the topic. They're all sensational. They're all stuff with ads inserted here and the like. If anybody out there knows, for both of our benefits, what podcasts might be, in addition to how you answer this question here, because I'm just finding that it's just trash out there at the minute.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it was one source. Really, I just do a lot of Googling, so you kind of find yourself on all sorts of different web pages or YouTube videos. There's a book out there called Why Does the World Exist?, which I found very fascinating, written by a German author. And it explores a lot of those questions: religious-based, non-religious-based, supernatural, reincarnation. It's really quite an interesting book. And then when I was writing this record, I researched a lot of that, and you find yourself finding, it's crazy how you read some poems or pages that were written by someone back 1,000 years ago or 500 years ago. And it's really extremely relevant. Not only is it extremely relevant, but I feel like people are asking the same questions today, which, if you consider how different our world is hundreds and hundreds of years later, all this technology, all this communication, all this connection, for us to be asking a lot of the same questions, that in itself is very unique. That in itself almost begs a question, which is why do these questions have this enduring power when we seem to be able to figure everything else out, so to speak? And that's kind of what the album's about, those eternal questions.
Eternal questions. Here's another one for you. I think sooner or later you'll get to it. Maybe you've already addressed it, but extraterrestrials and UFOs, particularly in the last 3 months or so, where you've had Senate whistleblowers talk about proof of life, this sort of thing. Did any of that even slightly influence what you were talking about this time around?
I can't say the UFOs did, just because we kind of worked on this record before that stuff really started coming out. But also, I guess I have a bit of a semi-cynical view when it comes to politics. And I kind of feel like that's a great distraction to a lot of challenging issues, which maybe aren't fun or exciting or to talk about. And, talking about aliens and UFO whistleblowers, that's very cool. That's a cool conversation to have. Talking about, complicated policy that can't be distilled to a politician's, motto or slogan, that's much more difficult and not nearly as fun. So I kind of feel like it's getting a little more attention than maybe it is owed, because it's easy, it's consumable, and it isn't something you really have to grapple with. Because whether aliens are real or not, or whether there's a UFO buzzing over the world every once in a while, kind of doesn't change what we have to do here on Earth and wake up and figure out every single day.
It's a shrewd observation, and I think you're right. Unfortunately, in that it was a whistleblower, it wasn't an official source that came from the US government and acknowledged the presence or the UFO or UAP. I think they are artifacts. But with regards to the political situation in the United States, and it's not just there, it's across the entire Western Hemisphere at the moment. It mirrors from Europe, Britain, Australia, New Zealand, Canada, the United States. We're all sort of under the hammer of the same left-wing ideology at the moment. Did any of that, have you got any thoughts or designs potentially of starting to talk about that in the future with regards to your lyrical themes?
I can't say that I've started to incorporate that into our music yet. I think, for me, music is therapy. It really is. And I think for the listener, it's therapy too. And then there's also enjoyment in it. And I don't really enjoy politics. They're more frustrating than they are positive, frankly. And so it might suck some of the joy out of the experience to bring that type of frustration into it. And we're supposed to be an escape. You know what I mean? We're supposed to be something where you can shut the world out with our music. And so I don't know. I know there's a few bands in the genre that have embraced the political stuff. And honestly, I wonder how much the audience really responds to that. Obviously, you have a great song regardless of the lyrical content, but how much are they really relating to the politics? I have to wonder. I don't really know what the answer to that is. And that's not really our mission. Like, my mission is not to try to sway one person one way or the other. I'm not proselytizing for any political party. Our goal, I guess, as a band is a little more zoomed out from that minutia. And it's more about kind of asking these bigger questions and kind of pontificating, I guess, kind of more like a thinker and less like kind of what's the word of the day, so to speak,
Yeah, it's great to hear you're not ideologically motivated, though, because there are some bands that do that. But just that point there that you mentioned, I actually find that I'm in a unique position being a podcaster in that I can talk about all these sorts of things, and I often do. Got a mortgage, you're a taxpayer, no doubt your kids that go to school, this sort of thing. And a lot of the audience reflects that as well. So that's where we get interested, because we want to know where our tax dollars are being spent and what sort of ideology is underpinning the philosophy that motivates where that money goes to. And right now we're just under the hammer of this, this big pharma, intersectional woke politics, all this bullshit that's going on at the moment. And it would be just lovely to come out the other side of it where I don't think we were ever at a point where people who were like a hardcore left-wing type, they could ever sort of tolerate anybody else. But it'd be nice to go back to a point, or even forward to a point, I probably should say, where politics just becomes part of the conversation and it isn't this signifying characteristic of who you are and what you do.
Yeah, that is a good point. And I think the pendulum swings. I think if you really kind of examine political history and go back 10 years, 20 years, 30, 40, 50, 60, the pendulum swings. You see it swing to the right, you see it swing to the left. And I think really what that to me represents is people are just generally dissatisfied at all times. And so whatever's happening, they generally are going to become tired of it. And I think the pendulum was swinging one way and people became tired of that. And now it's swinging another way. And it kind of seems like people are already getting tired of that. And it's sort of maybe coming back to something more moderate, or maybe people are starting to speak up and say, let's kind of get a little more in the middle here and not so far to one way or the other. And it's just, as far as musicians go, I don't see myself as like a political pontificator. So I don't know that I really have any more insight than, enough insight to be listened to, so to speak, like I'll have a conversation with anybody personally, of course, but I don't claim to have any answers. Or I think both sides can have good ideas, and I think both sides can have horrible ideas. And generally that's why I'm a moderate. I've voted for presidents of both political parties over the years here in the States, and I'm a little bit older. I'm 38 years old. So, I've been voting, since I was 18. Back in, 2004 was the first, presidential vote that I participated in. And so I think the pendulum swings. And I also don't think it's always going to be about identity politics and culture politics, which is really what the conversations are about right now. At some point, we need to talk about policy. You know what I mean? You talk about where our tax dollars go, what's happening with our borders, what's happening with national security, what's happening on a geopolitical level. We really need to start, what's happening with where we get our energy, with where we get our resource. Those conversations are very complex. Those conversations aren't particularly exciting. You can't really put it on a sign and go protest in the street. So it's not something anyone really wants to focus on. And so I think that's kind of why we're trapped in this culture politics loop right now. Is it works great for getting people outraged, regardless of which side you're on. Both team says the other side is going to ruin the place. And I think it works great for a headline, but what you're starting to see is a breakdown in politics. And I don't think anybody's really getting what they want. Frankly, it just seems like it's kind of a gridlock mess.
Yeah, and we don't see it changing anytime soon, unfortunately. Yeah, I think whilst you've got the dual party system, which is the case right across the Western Hemisphere, and I suppose at least we've got that. We don't just have some sort of banana republic where you have one person who continues to one party. Like across most of Africa, if not all of Africa and vast swathes of Asia, where the people actually have some semblance of a voice. But yeah, I hope I'm wrong, mate. I hope that that what we're dealing with at the moment does come to an end sometime in the next 4 to 5 years or so, because it's just so ideologically driven and it's ridiculous. It's not about policy. To your point there, it certainly is about ideology and ensuring that you fit very rigidly into the boxes and the confines of that ideology. And you're just seeing it across music. And the other big thing that comes out of that is censorship, of course. And we've seen a lot of that lately. And to Jordan Peterson's point that he's made many times, it's the signs of a society in decline. I'm paraphrasing here, not quoting, but as self-censorship, when people choose not to say what's within them. And that's the very version of hell that I think we can slide into. And it's whether it's social media echo chambers that are encouraging that or not. For me personally, mate, with the show, I just make a point of if I've got a thought or a feeling, and if the person that I'm speaking to is willing to go on that journey just for a moment, just for 5-10 minutes or whatever it is, then it's up to us to have that chat and not self-censor. Because there's a lot of people out there, mate. I hear them, the podcasters and the hosts. Oh, I don't want to talk about that. I don't want to alienate or anything like that. And it's like, well, there's an element of cowardice in that to me as well. Okay, because you've got to be able to have conversations and air thoughts and feelings in the moment, which may or may not be, specifically correct if you want to run them over a rule in the way that everybody seems to want to do these days. But who gives a shit? We're just people leading lives, raising kids, paying mortgages, playing music is the most important thing for this conversation.
To pay the mortgage.
Yeah, to pay the mortgage. It would be lovely. It'd just be lovely to see people stand on their own feet. And, I just don't want to mix words here. It's 95% of the bullshit that we're dealing with at the moment comes from the left, and there might be 5% or so that comes from the right. But just with every election cycle, we see everything heat up again. And it feels like we had a bloody US election last week. How quick time is going.
We got another one coming up, and and it's I guess it's going to be the rematch, which I feel like that there's got to be better options out there, but here we are. And I think there's a saying out there that you've probably heard many times, which is hard times create good men create good times create weak men.
It's a great saying.
You know what part of that cycle we're in right now. And when I say men, I'm not necessarily meaning men. It should be culture, weak culture. You know what I mean? And I think that's kind of what it is. I think everyone has had it really, really, really good. And if you, again, like you said, you look at some of these countries in Africa, some of the places throughout Asia, China, they're not having these conversations. You don't have a say in anything. A lot of times you can't even have private property. You can't leave. China's committing an entire genocide against a group of people that have a different religion.
The Uyghurs,
we don't. We don't have that in Western society. So I think we are very, very fortunate for the things that we do have. And because it is so easy, we find very, niche things to run up the flagpole and decide this is what the entire country needs to talk about. Is this one thing that pertains to, less than 1% of the population. And really it's because we don't have anything else to complain about, so we got to find something. And I think that is a bit of a reflection of people not realizing how good we have it in a Western society. And yeah, we have problems, of course. There is no utopia. Everywhere there's people, there'll be problems. But we have it really, really good here. And it's for a reason. It's for a reason. It's because we have laws that protect people. It's because we have order. It's because we know who's coming into our countries, right? And we protect it. Yeah. And that's important. And I don't think it's really easy to dismiss conversations that are challenging with a word. It's racist. It's fill in the blank phobic. When really it's not. You need to have a conversation with a dialogue and an exchange. And guess what? At the end of it, there may not be a one word or one sentence answer, but we're in a time where if it can't be distilled into a tweet that is a clapback that has all the cool words in it, then who cares? Well, I don't have time to talk about that. And I think that's just it's just a broader symptom of all the freebies that the Western world is enjoying, which is, we have everything. Literally, we have everything. And the fact that we have the conversations that we have is evidence of the fact that we have everything, regardless of where on the political spectrum you might be. The fact that the conversation is even taking place shows that we're enjoying a freedom that the rest of the world, a lot of parts of the world don't have at all,
You're right. You're spot on. You're right. So many really good points there. And I guess I'll round out the subject by saying that, and I've told this story on the podcast a few times, but my father-in-law was from Croatia, former Yugoslavia, and was Yugoslavia at the time because it was after World War II. But if he didn't leave under the hammer of the socialist regime that was there, he would have been murdered. Simple as that. So he ended up walking out to through Italy to Austria, or I think it was that way, and then back again. I think it was, then eventually to Australia. He got in a boat and came to Australia as part of a migration program in the late 60s or early 70s. Now, the point there is my kids are related to somebody who lived under the hammer of a communist regime and hated socialism as a consequence. Of course he would. But you got a lot of these kids these days, these people who go to university or what have you, or to your point, they've been given everything because we have that sort of a society these days, the welfare state, that have embraced socialism. They've embraced communism and Marxism in particular, and they say this is the solution to all that ails us because of capitalism. It's capitalism is bad, ergo socialism. And you see that again and again and again and again. And it's a sizable minority. It may be up to 20% of the youth that are like that. Certainly at universities, it's probably higher. But it's like we're almost being forced into this under the anvil of these Marxist philosophies yet again. Okay, yet we haven't learned from these kids haven't learned from history how many atrocities, how many genocides, how many murders have occurred under the hammer of socialism right across the world throughout the bloody 20th century, the horrific 20th century. My grandfather lived with shrapnel through his body because he was bombed during World War II, this sort of thing. And that's another thing. A lot of these youth, they're separated from having conversations with relatives and people in their inner sanctum, their family, in that way. So, yeah, it's just an observation that I make. And I think I really want to thank you for going there and having a bit of an exchange about that, because as I say, I had when we've sort of finished up, I'll tell you about another musician I had a conversation with recently who contacted me and asked me not to release an episode based on these sorts of topics here. To me, it's ridiculous. That's what I say about self-censorship. It's like, what are we doing? If we can't have these chats, where are we?
I think it's fear of reprisal, right? I mean, I'll get canceled or what have you, and it's unfortunate that we're in that position. I think again, it's that reflection of entitlement. I can't hear something I don't like. It's like, wow, you have it so good that, and it's not even like here. Like you could just turn it off and walk away. Like, if you don't, it's just like a TV show. I don't like Friends, so I just change the channel when Friends is on. Like, it's really just that simple. I don't get offended by Friends because I don't care for it. But, and kind of speaking to you saying how some of the younger folks are somehow thinking that socialism or communism is the answer. To me, that's pure ignorance. And I don't even couch that as a political opinion. That's like a historical opinion. To me, I don't even look at that as like it's like not even like a politically related question. It's just like a way of life question. I can't imagine someone thinking that communism, and I guess, you can look at Norway and say, well, hey, socialism works there. And it's like, well, it's not, it is and it isn't. They have socialist programs, but they still are also using a lot of capitalism to get where they're at.
Correct. Yeah.
I mean, they're exporting lots and lots of oil right now to Europe, which, Norway and Sweden are supposed to be like, these, kind of God's gift to green. But really, they're supplying Europe with all their oil.
Same
right
with Canada.
now.
It's the same with Canada. And we here in Australia too, with all of our fossil fuel exports, the iron ore exports that underpin China's economy, all the shit. There's something like, I'll get the statistic wrong, but it's something like a quarter of all things made at the moment have Australian ore in them. Okay, and all that goes through a smeltering process, which needs power and energy, and that's all in the world's manufacturing center, which is in China these days. So all of these liberal types, they want to try and confine these economies, but only aspects of them. Okay, because if they don't then have the money to power, if they don't have the money, these governments, these left-wing governments don't have the money from mining royalties to fund their socialist policies, they don't get voted back in again. It's a crazy paradox.
Yeah, and I think it's also part of it is, I think that the really young generation, we had the benefit of kind of watching this happen. Whereas if maybe you look at someone who is 15, 16, 17, it's always been this way. And the real interesting thing is, you talk to some of these kids, they legitimately think the world is going to end in like 10 years because of climate change. Yeah. Like they think like, well, we're all dead in 10 years anyway. And it's like, you really think that? And they're like, well, yeah. And that to me kind of gives you a lot of insight into the attitude that they have, because if that were really true, if the world really was going to end in 10 years, then I guess my viewpoints would be quite a bit different as well. And I would kind of have this, I guess, alarmist outlook, or this idea that, well, I'm never going to own anything. I'm never going to grow up and become an adult with children. So we just need to have the government just come in, wave their magic wand and fix it. And not only is that not going to happen, because that's just not the way government works, unless it's an authoritarian regime, and their magic wand isn't giving you what you want. Trust me, it's just, I think it's just, it's maybe one of those things where they have to, it sounds old, like an old person thing to say, but they have to grow up a little bit and realize that, get some life experience, get out in the world, get out of school. First of all, like, school is the beginning of life. It's not where you become a fully formed person. I'm 38 years old and I'm still changing, and I still have a lot of life left to go. I'm sure I'll be different in another 30 years. I think when you're that age and you've really been told life, I mean, look at every commercial that comes out. Everything's you. Everything's about you. You. Live your dream. Be you. You don't have to do anything and you're perfect. If you've been hearing that your entire life, alongside the world's going to end tomorrow because the oceans are going to rise and we're all going to burn to death, I'd just be living for myself too, right? What do I have to lose? I'm not going to make it to 30. The world's going to burn up when I'm 25. Who gives a shit? And I think they have to grow past that attitude and realize, wow, like, that was kind of just alarmist culture, and that's actually not really what's going to happen. And you're going to have to figure out how to get your kids to school, and you're going to have to find a job that doesn't involve, Instagram or YouTube. And you're going to have to get through life, which, like the rest of us have realized, you want to get through life by your own means, your own accord, your own perspective. You don't want to be told what you're going to do. You don't want all your earnings to be taken from you. You don't want your kids to be raised by a system. You want to raise them yourself. And unfortunately, I just don't think they've reached that point in life yet where they realize that.
Yeah, they've approached the debate around the future in the same way that the Inquisitors did back in the day, because we're a godless society these days across the West, which I simply cannot agree with. Okay, you still have to have a foundation of faith. I firmly believe that, and that's been seen again and again and again. That when you lose your foundation of faith, particularly our shared Greco-Roman, Judeo-Christian heritage that we've got, it needs to be honoured. And these kids are growing up in these secular households, in secular schools that are not teaching that there is a source beyond you. There is a power that is a form of creation, if you like. And in the absence of faith and spirituality, whether it be through Christianity or Judaism, you're seeing them, initially you saw them embrace sort of Buddhism and aspects of Hinduism. Even I went for the Hare Krishna thing for a little bit there, but not as a participant, just as a keen observer and as an interested party. But woke is now the new religion. And they've embraced that. You're seeing them, it's like, how the travelers used to placate themselves on the road back in the day and do all that sort of shit. You're seeing the same thing with the Extinction Rebellion people, the way that they lie down in front of trucks and oil tankers and this sort of shit going on. Instagram and Twitter is full of these images. And you just got to wonder exactly, like, what we've got going for us, I think, just to go back to an earlier point, is that when will we get out of this? Well, these cycles go, the revolution's spinning hard. The cycle's going very quickly. But it's like, okay, so we're in the middle of this woke epidemic, this godless woke epidemic, where it's effectively a religion. People are approaching it with the same zealotry.
I'll agree with that. Yeah, it is.
Yeah. But what's next? Wonder what comes next, and how quickly will it come next? Because if it's this bad now, and I'm certainly an optimist, I don't agree that the future is worse, but I'm simply saying, how much worse can it get because of all this woke ideology before we actually start the uptick and coming back out of it? And keyword, personal responsibility kicks back in again, and people are responsible for their own psychological health as they are for how much money comes into their households, instead of blaming everything and saying, as I mentioned already, ergo socialism, the state governs all.
I think they got to grow up. I think they got to grow up. I honestly think that's what it is. I think at some point they're going to realize exactly what we said. Like, I got to figure out how to have a life beyond being a child. And that's when you realize that this religion of cultural politics, identity politics, it's not going to get you through life. It's just not. And also the idea that we can't have differing opinions. Right? At some point, you are going to have to work with someone who has a different view on life than you. You're going to be neighbors with someone who doesn't think exactly like you. I don't think a lot of these kids have experienced that yet. I think they're in their own bubble of an echo chamber of where whatever they say, somebody just says, you're absolutely right. And the world's all about you. So how could you be wrong? And that's, to me, that's just the ignorance of youth. And I don't mean that in a derogatory way. Just when you're dumb, when you're young, you're dumb. You don't know much. You know what I mean? You're still figuring it out. And I think it's easy for people these days to think they have all the answers. Because if you look at our leaders, our celebrities, all these talking heads, no one's ever wrong. They're always so sure of themselves, regardless of where they are on any issue. They know the answer. It's a matter of fact. There's no questioning it. I'm not wrong. And if you tell me I'm wrong, you're the problem. And that's just not how society can actually function. People have to be able to disagree. We have to be able to have different opinions. We still have to be able to work together and get whatever it is we're trying to do done. And I don't think a lot of them have had to experience that yet. And once they get out of school, get out of their parents' house, and get into society, they're going to realize, like, oh, okay, well, I guess that was a fun thought experiment, but now this is real life.
I just had to look it up then. There's an alleged quote by Churchill, which is that if a man is not a socialist by the time he is 20, he has no heart. And if he is not a conservative by the time he is 40, he has no brain. I think that summarizes it neatly.
Not only does it summarize it, but what year did that quote come out?
I can't. I'll have to do a bit more diving on it there. It
80
doesn't actually
years ago, something like that.
It'd be in the 30s or 40s. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So 80, 90 years ago. The fact that it's still accurate and rings true really tells you, like, this moment we're experiencing, it's unique to our experience because of our age. I don't think it's unique to the human condition, though. I think it's actually a cycle that us as human beings are fairly familiar with. It's just the ebb and flow of culture.
Well, something else he said that's just come up on Google here is this quote is attributed on May 28th, 1948. Socialism is the philosophy of failure, the creed of ignorance, and the gospel of envy. And I think that summarizes socialism very nicely. It's right there.
And think about those three things. So we said envy, ignorance, and then what was the third one?
Failure. Philosophy of failure.
Failure, right. So think about it. Look at the way social media presents itself. If you take social media at face value, it's very easy to feel like a failure, right? Look at everyone else living the dream, and I'm just stuck here doom scrolling. I guess I'm a failure. Ignorance, well, that can be to age, right? And then envy. It's very easy to see what everyone else has that you don't have, right? And you feel powerless because you think you're a failure. And so, well, I can't do anything about it. So I guess government's going to have to fix it. And so that's how you arrive at this notion that somehow politicians are going to make it better. And the fact that that's an old quote shows that we're not dealing with anything new here. Yeah.
You've got a very intelligent take on things, Scott. I really would encourage you, not now, not in the immediate future, but you're going to be doing this a long time. Let's face it. I mean, Aussie's still bloody out there singing, and the Stones are still doing it, mate. But at some point, mate, I think you could easily switch across to dialogue through lyrics that focus on a lot more of these topics we're talking about, because I do think, I really, to be honest, mate, I really wish that there was more of this sort of thing happening within our genre, meaning extreme metal, because there's just so many people that I talk to who share our point of view, yet not a lot of it goes through into the lyrical side of things yet.
Yeah, I think probably, it's also kind of like, do you even want the headache? You know what I mean?
Like, I'll get that.
Look, if you think differently than me, think differently than me. I kind of don't care, and not like in like a negative way, but it's like everybody's supposed to have a different opinion, right? I kind of thought that's why we, come up, and all Western nations, but me specifically, I'm an American. To me, that's kind of what the American flag represented was, look, we're all different, but we're all here together. And we all realize that without the protections that our freedom gives us, we wouldn't have the ability to be different and coexist. And so maybe that's a bit idealistic on my part, but at least that was the notion that was always conveyed to me by what does freedom mean? It means I have the right to be me. You have the right to be you. And I'm not going to call you whatever name I can think of just because you think differently than me, and also it needs to be a system that works for all parties, right? It shouldn't be just catering to one group of people. I don't see any value in that.
Yeah, no, I hear you. Do you guys all in the band, do you talk about these sort of things on tour buses?
Yeah, I suppose we do. I mean, again, we're not like kind of the political day to day is not something we're really
just died on me. Can you still hear me on this microphone?
Yeah. Loud and clear. Cool. No worries. Yep.
I've been doing interviews like all day. The political stuff is not something that we really like go back and forth on too much. I guess sometimes we do here and there, but it's not like we have like a sit down. It's like it'll just come up, kind of sporadically, and we'll talk about it. But all of us are older in the band, and also all of us run a business, which I think that gives us a very different perspective. If you run a business and you're a business owner, you feel the weight of taxes. You feel the weight of government oversight. You feel the weight of saying, well, wait a minute, why is my effective tax rate, 35% as a self-employed person? Why? Because I'm self-employed, I don't have access, all these benefits that the state and the government hands out. As a self-employed individual, I don't have access to any of those. So I've had to figure it out for 18 years. And I think that gives me a much different perspective than a younger person that maybe goes to university and works at a coffee shop,
Yeah, I hear you loud and clear on that point there. Universities, mate, they used to be places of thought, culture, and new thought more specifically, but these days they just tend to be about indoctrination. And I was lucky to go to a great one here locally, which takes in a lot of American students, I must add too. But I don't think it's based on the American system, but it has elements of it. Bond University, and it's not unique from the perspective that it's got international students. About half of them would come from abroad, and you tend to sort of get a good feeling on things that when young people, youth, people in their early 20s aren't being indoctrinated, they're capable of very powerful new coming up to conclusions by themselves, if you like, and I hope there's a bit more of it moving forward. So, mate, I'll got one more question for you, and it's a very different topic, subject matter to the one we've just been talking about. But when are you coming to Australia? I think the last time we spoke to you was a possibility, but is it likely on this album cycle here?
We did come down with The Iris Murder in what was it, September of 21? No, September of 22.
Oh, shit. Sorry, I missed it. Yeah, gotcha.
Yeah, we did come down with Thy Art and Malevolence. I know our goal is to get back in 24. We have some U.S. tours and a European tour, but we're going to try to get there in 24. So hopefully we can stick with that.
Fingers crossed. Sorry, I missed that one there. It rings a bell now, I think, because I'm a muso too. So I might have been. I often miss the gigs on Friday, Saturday, Sunday night because I've got a gig on one of those 3 nights, and inevitably it falls on a band that I actually really want to watch. And I'll be honest, I'm not a huge Thy Art Is Murder fan either, as the other thing. So I might have glossed over it and thought,
it was their tour. We were supporting them.
I think I know what you mean.
I miss all the shows because I'm playing shows. I actually I never get out to shows.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, obviously, that's the thing, isn't it? I know it's. Do you get much downtime when you're on the road, especially when you're touring a country like Australia, or is it just one night after the other in an airport?
Oh, it's one night after another because it all comes down to money, right? If we're sitting in some place, there has to be a hotel, there has to be food. It's expensive, right? So we got to play to keep the lights on, and then once we're done playing, get on a plane and go home.
Yeah, it's a lot like that. Yeah. It's we're just grateful, mate, that you make the trip to come down here. I know it's not easy, and I know it costs a lot more to go to other parts of the world or go to B grade or C grade markets. When I say B grade and C grade, the lesser visited markets in the States to come down here, mate. But you've got a fan base down here, and
absolutely.
You've always been a killer band. I've got to say that ever since it's only about my awareness of you has really only sort of been in the last 5 or 6 years or so when I started to awaken to all of these great bands that were around after being in a Morbid Angel and those bands for so long. But you're certainly the leaders of the pack in so many regards, mate. So, just off the back of this conversation here, man, just please keep doing what you're doing, and hopefully I'll see you down here sometime soon.
I hope so too, man. I look forward to that.
Thanks, brother. Appreciate it.
Thank you, man. Take care.
What a fantastic fella. At this point, if I could have conversations that resembled that was the ticket that I was given, I would take it, let me tell you, because it's worth exploring these ideas and talking about them, because at the moment, censorship, it's just absolutely rabid, isn't it, across YouTube and the very prominent platforms that are out there. But rest assured, I will always bring you the conversations that very few other people are having with the musicians whose music we all like listening to. Okay, so if you like that one, there are plenty of conversations over at scarsandguitars.com that you might be interested in. I've had at this point almost 750, I think it's over that amount there, so much for you to choose from. And if you like listening, maybe you like reading, and I've written a book featuring so many of the artists and the musicians that I've spoken to for the show. Scars and Guitars, Volume 1, Conversations from the World of Heavy Metal and Beyond. Click the link on the banner on the website and you'll be taken to a marketplace of your choice, and you know the rest. Download a sample. And yeah, I really appreciate that people are buying the book, actually. So if you do buy it, or if you have bought it, please do hit me up, because I want to thank you personally. On that note, there's some more information to share with you to entice you into having a look at the book. But before we get to that, I'll bid you a fond farewell. My name is Andrew Mackay-Smith, and I'm the host of the Scars and Guitars podcast. Until next time, it is a very goodbye for now.
This is Eric Rattan of Cannibal Corpse. You are listening to the Scars and Guitars podcast with Andrew Mackay-Smith.
I've been the host of the Scars and Guitars podcast since 2017. The first musician I interviewed for the show was David Vincent from Morbid Angel, and things have just snowballed from there. In all, I've posted almost 650 podcast episodes featuring conversations with many of the leading lights of rock, heavy metal, and beyond. It just got to a point where I thought, I need to write a book about all this, so that's exactly what I did. In Scars and Guitars Volume 1, you'll read a heap of deep reveals and commentary, such as Des Fafara talking about Coal Chamber and why the band will never return.
You know, if you're a band just starting out, you need to hear me. Do not start a band with partners. Ever.
Yeah, wise words there. Sage advice, mate, for anybody.
Don't ever, because I can't go do Coal Chamber right now unless I get others involved.
Phil Anselmo talks about the episode in his career which gives him the greatest sense of accomplishment.
I think the staying power of the fans and the staying power of the songs, you know, whether it's Pantera, Down, or Superjoint, the fans remember the songs.
Alex Skolnick from Testament confirms that, yes, playing the guitar in Ozzy's band is anything but an ordinary gig. Will Silent Oz from Dimmu Borgir write a book? Pa from Sabaton gives advice to people who want to start a band.
Look at the team around you, look at the bandmates. If the guys want to be on the stage, then it's all cool. If the guys want to be backstage, then it's not going to be cool.
Current and former members of Cradle of Filth discuss the band's seminal 90s material. Read about the reaction to George Lynch and Mark from Suicide Silence's comments when they throw shade at then President Donald Trump.
We have this idiotic monster, you know, this egotistical, self-aggrandizing, complete piece of shit in there. I just can't understand how we've gotten to this place.
And yeah, we kicked a hornet's nest with Sepultura. Percussive overlord Gene Hoglan talks about recording with Chuck Schuldiner.
Chuck was always, he was very open-minded, and he was into having his musicians that were playing with him just reach out for the best stuff that they had.
Phil Campbell from Motorhead discusses what it takes to get sober. John Five answers his critics who dismiss his tenure with Marilyn Manson.
You know, my name is John Five, and Manson gave me that name, and I had some of the best years of my life in that band and learned a lot. And
we get the lowdown on Treyarch Zagtoth from those who would know, including his mother. All across Scars and Guitars Volume 1, there are moments of tension, relief, tragedy, exhilaration, and throughout it all, you'll obtain insight that I believe no one else has managed to obtain from many of your favourite artists. So treat yourself. Scars and Guitars Volume 1 is currently available as an ebook with a print edition on the horizon. Follow the links attached and download a sample. I'm sure you'll be compelled to read the whole book.